meteorologist Aisha Scott, and today we are going to briefly talk about hurricanes. I say briefly because we are almost at the start of hurricane season, so we're going to get way more in detail about hurricanes and tropical systems as we work our way through hurricane season. So don't forget, hurricane season starts June 1st and it runs through November 30th. All right, so let's talk about a hurricane. So a hurricane is just a type of storm. It's actually called a tropical cyclone. It forms over tropical, even subtropical waters. Now, a tropical cyclone is a rotating low pressure system, and it has organized thunderstorms, but it doesn't have fronts, right? So it doesn't have cold fronts or warm fronts like we would typically see on our weather maps. Now, going to the second slide, I want to show you this graphic. I actually really like it. It's from weather.gov, and it talks about what a hurricane needs step by step. So let's start at number one. So a hurricane needs warm ocean water. Hurricanes do not like land at all. So in order for them to grow, to strengthen, to thrive, if that's the case, they need warm ocean water. So ocean water that is warmer than 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It provides the energy for the hurricanes. It also causes that humid air that is associated with the warm water. It causes it to rise. So let's go to number two. Number two, winds coming together force the air upward, right? So it causes that air to rise. Number three, winds flow outward above the storm, allowing the air below to rise. So here's the thing with number three. Typically, the structure of a strong hurricane, you have high pressure aloft. So you have high pressure over top of that low pressure system, right? Of that hurricane. So high pressure over top allows the hurricane to basically fuel itself. It allows the winds to continue to go outward from the storm and then rise from below, right? So it allows it to sustain itself. Number four, humid air rising makes the clouds of the storm. So we talked about that. The air rises, it creates the clouds, which in turn actually causes the rain. And then number five, it needs light winds outside the hurricane to actually steer it and to let it grow. Hurricanes do not like what's called wind shear. Okay, so wind shear, if you may have heard us on TV, go on air and say, the wind shear in this area is really bad, or it's tearing this storm apart, because hurricanes need light winds surrounding it in order for it to sustain itself, in order for it to grow. If the wind shear is too high, so the wind shear basically, wind speed is different at different levels of the atmosphere, wind direction also. So if the wind shear is very strong, then it could tear these storms apart, right? So it likes light winds outside of the hurricane to help steer it and also to let it grow. Now, going to the next slide, we're taking a look at the structure of a hurricane. And I wanted to point out three main areas. So the first is the eye. So the eye is notated in the center. You see the blue arrows pointing down. So the eye of the hurricane is actually sinking air. So with the sinking air, what's happening is the air is clear. So if you've ever experienced the eye of a hurricane before, you may have seen the sun come out. It's very tranquil, it's peaceful, it's very calm. And a lot of times people will sometimes confuse the eye of the hurricane with the storm being over. So that's why a lot of times I will say, if I get on TV and the eye of the hurricane is passing over your house, and I may say, hey, don't go outside, although things look to be fine and quiet and clear, because on the backside of that eye is where we have the real problems. So just outside of the eye is the eye wall. This is the most intense part of the storm. Some of the strongest winds at the surface of a hurricane, I should say, are right on the outside of that eye. And this is also where you have some of the strongest thunderstorms as well. Third, we have the rain bands. So just on the outside of the eye wall and pretty much stretching from the center out, you have those rain bands. So if a hurricane is approaching you, you likely will start to experience those rain bands, or you will, before you actually get to the eye wall or even the eye of the hurricane, if that eye of the hurricane or if the hurricane is passing directly over your area. All right, next let's talk about the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Scale, because this is actually the way that tropical cyclones are classified based all on the wind speeds. So a tropical depression is winds less than 38 miles per hour. When we get to a tropical storm that should say 39 to 73 miles per hour, that will be considered a tropical storm. Now, above 74 miles per hour, or really 74 miles per hour and higher, that's when we start to get to hurricane strength. So a category 1 hurricane, 74 to 95 miles per hour. A category 2, 96 miles per hour up to 110 miles per hour. A category 3, 111 to 129 miles per hour. A category 4, 130 to 156 miles per hour. And a category 5 is 157 plus miles per hour. So that is a strong hurricane. Now, I want to show you this picture because one hurricane that was actually a category 5 hurricane at one point was Hurricane Katrina. So some of you may be familiar with Hurricane Katrina. It was back in 2005. And I want to show you this picture that I got off of Britannica.com. And it shows you the before and after, or I guess in this case, the after and before of Hurricane Katrina. And that's the Superdome that you see there at the bottom. You can see what it looked like before on your right hand side and then on your left hand side. Hurricane Katrina completely devastated New Orleans. So this is in New Orleans, Louisiana. And we know, if you were old enough then to see some of the pictures and the images and the video that came out of New Orleans because of the destruction of Hurricane Katrina, hurricanes can completely change not only lives, but also the landscape of cities and even towns for that matter. Also, Hurricane Matthew, some of you here in North Carolina, especially Eastern North Carolina, Southeastern Virginia, may remember Hurricane Matthew, which was back in October of 2016. This was one picture from NBCnews.com, because also Hurricane Matthew caused a lot of flooding, a lot of damage. That was actually the first time, just kind of telling a personal story, that was the first time that I had ever gone to the Caribbean during hurricane season. I always told myself I wouldn't. A friend convinced me to go on a cruise in October, and let's just say I will never do that again because it was not fun. But hurricanes are certainly something that storms that you want to take seriously and that you want to make sure that you are paying close attention to, because they are difficult to forecast in some instances and they almost have a mind of their own. So we are getting closer to hurricane season. It starts June 1st, as I mentioned. So we will go into more detail about hurricane season and what you need to stay ready coming up here, hopefully soon. If not soon, then certainly in the beginning of hurricane season.